The dropship tore through the cloud line like a spear dipped in fire, its engine snarling as it descended over the northern treetops. Below, the ancient forest stood quiet and vast, the early morning fog clinging to pine needles like a secret not yet told. Birds scattered in startled arcs as the ship broke the tree-line, descending with a force that bent the evergreens. Snow dust rose like ghosts as landing struts thudded into the earth. From within the armored transport, 12 soldiers stood ready, black armor, alien frames, expressions coiled with contempt. They were part of the 7th Galactic Enforcement Legion, a division sent to pacify what little resistance still clung to Earth's more rugged corners. This mission was meant to be swift, a routine sweep of a zone labeled Hostile Primitive. Their boots were polished, their rifles sleek, their attitude complacent. As the ramp hissed open, the commander stepped out first. Captain Dorvex, tall and wiry, with gray scales glinting under his matte black helm. His eyes were sharp, slitted like a viper's, and humorless, except when he thought himself above something, which was often. Primitive terrain, he muttered, surveying the dense coniferous forest ahead. Another backwater patch clinging to resistance mythology. A second soldier laughed. Do these humans ever learn? They spread out quickly, checking scanners, looking for heat signatures. The cold bit through even their armor's thermal lining. Snow muffled their movement, but the air was still enough that every breath echoed. It felt too quiet. No city lights. No drone noise. Just trees, and the weight of centuries pressing in. They came across a cabin not long after. Nestled in a small clearing, the structure was old but well-maintained. Wood-chopped, fire smoke curling into the pale sky, the scent of pine and cured meat whispering from its log-lined porch. It looked like it belonged to another time entirely. Dorvex raised a brow ridge. Interesting. One human remained behind. They approached in formation, weapons slung but fingers twitching on triggers. No resistance was expected, but protocol insisted. Dorvex nodded at one of the troops to knock. Before his knuckles touched the wooden door, it creaked open. She stood there, alone, unarmed, calm. Maya Renault. Her coat was worn but clean. Thick wool, patched at the elbows. Her long dark braid was tied low, nearly touching the collar of her scarf. Her hands were visible, open, no weapons. But her eyes didn't flinch. They were a still lake beneath a frozen surface, wide and watchful. Dorvex scanned her with a handheld unit. No tech signature. No enhanced implants. No weapons. Just a woman in her 30s standing before 12 soldiers as if they'd walked into her backyard uninvited. Identification, Dorvex barked. She tilted her head slightly. You already know I'm here. Isn't that enough? Her accent was Canadian. Soft, with a flinty undertone that suggested years in these woods. Dorvex's lips curled. You were supposed to evacuate. This zone is marked for cleansing and reclamation. I didn't get the memo, she replied flatly. Behind Dorvex, one of the younger soldiers chuckled in Galactic. She's lucky she's not worth the ammo, another said. The rest of her kind fled like frightened mammals. Maya's gaze didn't shift, but her eyes moved, calculating, listening. The aliens assumed she didn't understand their language. They were wrong. Dorvex stepped forward, looming. This land is now under the stewardship of the Galactic Federation. You're trespassing. She shrugged. So arrest me. Dorvex narrowed his eyes. We're not here to babysit stragglers. We're here to exterminate threats. That what you think I am? She asked. The commander studied her for a moment longer. No, he said at last, with smug assurance. You're nothing. They left her then. Not out of mercy, out of disdain. The team pushed past the cabin, deeper into the forest, to complete their sweep. Their laughter echoed in the clearing like gravel in the wind. Maya watched them go. The snow began to fall again, light and silent. She closed the door slowly, latched it, and walked to the back room. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting golden shadows over a canvas bag by the window. Her fingers moved smoothly, unwrapping the bindings, revealing old military gear, a Canadian Forces combat suit, camouflaged for winter terrain. Her hands were steady as she removed her coat, stepped into the gear, zipped it to her throat. Her boots were already by the door, steel-toed, insulated, worn in. She opened a hidden panel behind the fireplace and pulled out a hard case. The kind you don't leave behind, even in peace. She flipped the latches. Inside lay a precision sniper rifle, Canadian manufactured, customized grip, advanced scope with an anti-glare lens, matte black finish. A weapon meant for distance, silence, and finality. She ran a cloth over the barrel once, not because it needed it, but because it was ritual. Familiarity in steel. They had mocked her in a language they assumed she didn't speak. They had walked into her forest, dragging arrogance like a scent trail. She had listened, measured, waited. Now she moved with intent, stepping outside again, the snow crunching beneath her boots. The fog had thickened, curling low between the trees like something alive. The wind whispered through the needles. She knew these woods in every direction, every bend of branch and dip of root. It was her home, her inheritance, her battlefield. They had numbers, technology, training, but she had patience. She had silence. She had the land. Maya moved east first, through a frozen streambed, her footprints vanishing beneath falling snow. She knew where they'd go, toward the old hydro facility, long since abandoned, its shell buried in cedar and ice. From there, they'd fan out. Standard patrol routes. Predictable. Taught in some alien war college 1,000 light-years away, on planets with no pines, no cold, no predators that stalked silently. They didn't know this terrain. But she did. She knew every hollow log, every vantage point, every echo path. She passed a fallen tree and ducked beneath it, eyes sharp. The sun hadn't risen fully, and the light that came was weak and gray, perfect for concealment. She moved without haste. There was no need to rush. This wasn't a fight. It was a hunt. By the time the soldiers had reached the hydro station, she was already watching from 400 meters out, scope steady, breath slow. Her finger never touched the trigger. Not yet. Not until they'd forget the fear of her. Let their arrogance grow again. Let them think they were alone. She knew how to take them apart. One by one. She lowered the rifle and slipped back into the trees. Back at the cabin, the fire still flickered gently. Dorvex stood at the perimeter of the hydro building, scanning a holographic map projected from his wrist. The unit had found no trace of weapon stockpiles, resistance fighters, or anything remotely threatening. He was already bored. "Waste of time," muttered one of the soldiers. Dorvex sighed. "We finish the sweep, log the scan, and return by nightfall. The woman isn't worth a second glance." One soldier smirked. "Should have brought her along for entertainment." They laughed again. Dismissive. Arrogant. Unaware of the silence tightening around them like a noose. The snow kept falling. Back near the cabin, a small trap was already in place. Nothing fancy, just a snare buried under a layer of powder, set to trigger with the slightest pressure. Maya checked it, adjusted the tension, then moved on. 10 meters north, she began carving a path that would seem natural. An animal trail, freshly trodden, leading deeper into a narrow canyon split. It would lead them into a blind spot. Tomorrow. Tonight, they'd sleep with one eye open. If they slept at all. She returned to her vantage point as the day bled out behind the clouds. The first campfire flared in the distance. Faint, orange, isolated. The Galactic soldiers had set up base in the shell of a building with shattered glass and rusted beams. They didn't even post sentries. Maya stared at the fire for a long time. Then she turned away. Back through the woods, stepping silently between branches like smoke. She returned to her cabin near midnight, stripping her gear, placing the rifle back into the case. She fed the fire once more, then sat in the glow, staring into the flames. They had come with mockery. They would leave in silence. If they left at all. Outside, the wind shifted. It carried with it the laughter of fools who thought the world belonged to them. She listened. Then she smiled. Tomorrow, the forest would answer. The forest was silent again, save for the brittle crunch of frost hardening under dawn's weight. The sky bruised from black to gray as a fresh layer of snow blanketed the branches, erasing old tracks, hiding new intentions. Maya moved before the sun fully rose, a ghost in wool and camouflage, her breath shallow against the wool of her scarf. The Galactic soldiers stirred late. Their arrogance had a rhythm, predictable and loud. They didn't move with the caution of prey or the instincts of predators. They moved like tourists, armed, entitled, and clumsy. From her perch above the hydro facility, Maya watched their camp wake. They emerged one by one, grumbling at the cold, knocking snow off their armor with idle smacks. Steam rose from portable ration packs. A couple soldiers bickered over signal interference. One tried realigning their comms tower, frustrated by static from the dense trees and frozen atmosphere. A world like this wasn't built for their systems. Maya sipped water from her thermos and adjusted her gloves. She counted 11. Dorvex was missing. She scanned the ridge. He stood alone, 50 meters from the camp, staring down at a narrow gully between the cliffs, his back to the rising sun. He had a small drone hovering at his shoulder, scanning the topography. Maya's eyes followed his line of sight. The gully would be a natural funnel. Tight, steep walls, snow-covered rock. The kind of place soldiers might want to cross to reach the southern forest basin. A shortcut. She smiled. That shortcut was the first step. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, Maya had moved. Through snowbanks and icy ravines, she retraced an old animal path leading to the mouth of the gully. She laid the first trap there, low-tech, brutal, and effective. A camouflaged pit with sharpened wooden stakes beneath a deceptive crust of snow and moss. Old-world tactics. The kind soldiers laughed at in training, until they fell into one. Half a kilometer farther, she planted the second. A tripwire strung between two frosted rocks, thin enough to be invisible in the snow glare. Its trigger linked to a log that hung above, carved and weighted, set to swing with bone-breaking force. Even galactic armor wouldn't absorb that cleanly. She moved efficiently, leaving no trace of her passage. Her breath slow, her limbs practiced. She wasn't rushing. She was orchestrating. The final trap was more precise. A signal jammer buried in the ice near the ridge's edge, synced to detonate a fragmentation mine if tampered with. Not standard military equipment. Scavenged, repurposed, and hidden in terrain these aliens didn't understand. She was a ghost building a graveyard. She circled back to her vantage point by midday, crouched beneath the arch of an uprooted pine, her scope trained on the camp once more. Dorvex was giving orders now. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she read the gestures. He was frustrated. Half the group was preparing to move, pack formation, rifles drawn. Their scanners were proving unreliable. The interference, coupled with the failed comms tower, had agitated them. They were headed south, toward the gully. Perfect. She adjusted her scope and waited. An hour later, they came into view, walking in pairs, boots thudding into untouched snow, unaware they were being herded by terrain and Maya's silent design. 5 soldiers. All armed. All scanning constantly. None of them seeing the true danger. The lead soldier stepped into the gully first. Tall. Broad. Helmet partially tinted. He held up a hand and the others slowed behind him. Then he stepped forward. The ice gave way with a sickening crunch. His scream was short, just a flash of sound before his body vanished into the pit. The thud echoed like a drumbeat as his armor hit the spikes. Maya didn't need to look to know he was dead. The others panicked. 2 surged forward, 1 backpedaled, and the 4th barked something into his comms. A futile gesture. The signal jammer cut everything into static. The second trap sprang before their formation could recover. The soldier who triggered the tripwire barely had time to shout before the log slammed into his chest, snapping armor and ribs alike. He crumpled like paper. The third fell back, stunned, shouting in their alien tongue, trying to drag the injured one from the pit. The 4th fired wildly into the trees. Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. The forest was doing exactly what it was meant to do, consume the unworthy. Eventually, the survivors retreated. They dragged one body out, left the rest. One limped, another's shoulder sparked with damaged plating. They didn't even retrieve the fallen weaponry. Their pride wouldn't let them stay, and their fear wouldn't let them think clearly. From her vantage, Maya watched them go. Her breath left her in a slow stream. 2 down. 1 crippled. The rest rattled. But she wasn't celebrating. Not yet. This was war, not vengeance. The only score was survival. She slipped away again, deeper into the terrain she knew by heart, and began mapping their likely fallback routes. They'd return to the facility. Maybe tighten patrols. Maybe try to call for backup. It wouldn't matter. The forest didn't answer to radio waves. That night, a storm rolled in, heavy winds tearing through the pines like angry ghosts, snow thickening into a white wall. Visibility dropped to meters. Even for Maya, the woods turned treacherous. She stayed low, traveling by instinct, hugging tree trunks and old paths marked only by memory. Near the facility, she saw fresh movement. Dorvex had doubled the watch. Sentries now walked in pairs, their helmets scanning constantly. One of the injured soldiers was inside, screaming as medkits hissed and machinery pulsed. They hadn't been prepared for injury without a medship. The snowstorm had trapped them here, isolated them further. She crept to the outer wall of the structure, rusted metal warped with frost, and slipped inside through a broken utility hatch near the rear. The noise of wind and suffering masked her movement. Inside, the place stank of ozone and sweat. She reached the storage room first. They'd stockpiled rations and thermal cores there. She didn't take anything. She just removed a power cell from the heating unit. Within hours, the whole storage section would freeze. She moved through the shadows like water, boots silent, breath slow. She passed the infirmary next. The wounded soldier lay sprawled on a slab, armor peeled back, chest torn and pulsing with coagulation fluid. The medic was trying to seal the damage with foam. Maya stared for a moment. Not at the wound. At the face. Young. Scared. She left him alive. Not out of mercy. Out of calculation. Fear spreads faster than fire. She exited the way she came, leaving only silence in her wake. Back in the woods, she dug in for the night under a snow shelter she'd carved weeks earlier, hidden beneath fir branches and rock. Inside, it was dark, close, and warm enough to stave off frostbite. She sipped tea made from pine needles and waited. The storm screamed outside. And in the facility, panic would bloom like rot. By morning, she was moving again. 2 more traps. This time near the west perimeter, set where the soldiers might try to retrieve supplies or explore escape routes. One was a collapsing tree snare. The other a distraction, a crude dummy made from scavenged fabric and scrap, half buried in snow, to trigger curiosity and break formation. She wasn't just hunting them. She was disassembling their unity. Piece by piece. Back at the ridge, Dorvex stood in the snow, unmoving. His posture had changed. Less arrogance. More calculation. He'd lost men. That fact alone gnawed at his ego, but Maya could see he was adjusting. His kind learned slowly, but they learned. He didn't send more patrols that day. He fortified. Good. Let him build a wall. Walls make it easier to starve the enemy. She returned to her cabin before dusk. Not because she was tired, but because everything had been set. The terrain was a chessboard. The traps were pieces. The storm was her ally. All she had to do now was wait for the next mistake. And she knew it would come. Because pride always walks faster than caution. Especially when you're running out of time. Dawn came slow and gray, the kind of morning that never fully woke up. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the snowfall. Not a bird call. Not a branch snapping. The forest held its breath, waiting. Maya Renault exhaled softly through her nose, her cheek resting against the frozen metal of her rifle. She had been lying prone in the snow for hours, buried beneath a canvas of white and burlap, her heartbeat slower than a drum's whisper. Her scope never wavered. She had eyes on the perimeter. The Galactic soldiers had begun to adapt. Dorvex had restructured their patrol patterns, rerouted supply paths, and posted sentries with thermal vision. But adaptation was not evolution. And tactics were not instinct. They were still predictable in a way terrain never was. Maya watched them shuffle through the facility yard, armor gleaming with condensation, weapons held tighter than before. Fear was an excellent teacher, but it also made hands tremble. She noted one soldier pause every few steps to glance behind. Another twitched at wind gusts. No one dared speak loud. The body count had taught them. The traps had scarred them. Now it was time to teach them fear of the unseen. The rifle Maya carried wasn't standard. It was handcrafted. A bolt-action long-range build with an integrated suppressor and a custom optic calibrated for deep cold. It had no digital readouts, no software assistance. Just precision, patience, and Maya's mind. Her father had taught her to shoot like this. Not just with aim, but with intent. You don't pull the trigger, he'd said. You decide. She had 3 shots planned. 1 to break their rhythm. 1 to collapse their cohesion. 1 to unmake the myth they clung to. She slowed her breath and adjusted the sight, tracking the upper tower of the facility. A sentry stood there, scanning the tree line with a mounted cannon. He'd been stationed there since sunrise, moving in slow circles, predictable arcs. Maya did not feel hatred. Only clarity. She fired once. The sound was a whisper. The silence afterward was louder. The sentry dropped without a sound, crumpling behind the tower's lip, a dark shape sagging into steel. The body didn't even slide. It just disappeared. The other soldiers didn't react at first. It took nearly a minute before someone noticed the absence. Then came the shouts. Orders. The clatter of boots. They didn't know where the shot came from. The angle, the range. It was too far, too quiet, too sudden. Maya had already moved. She crawled back through her cover, slow as snowmelt, rifle held against her chest. She didn't need a second shot yet. Let them spin. Let them deploy. Every unit scrambled now was a trail left behind. By midday, the search parties formed. 4 soldiers each, pushing outward in wedges, sensors flickering and helmets glowing with internal displays. They thought she would strike again while they were exposed. They were wrong. She waited. 2 hours passed. Then came the second shot. This one wasn't for the kill. It was for the mind. She chose the soldier farthest from the others. Not isolated, but exposed enough that no one could help. The bullet struck his weapon, not his body. It shattered the plasma rifle mid-aim, sending a burst of sparks into his visor and searing his gloves. He screamed. The others panicked. They turned in circles, rifles raised, shouting into radios that still only hummed with static. Their formations collapsed. One ran into a tree. Another discharged his weapon into the snow. Maya was already gone. She had changed elevation, moving through the broken rocks on the western ridge, deeper into the territory that only knew her scent and rhythm. Her breath was calm, even as her legs ached. She moved with no thought of the kill. Only control. Back at the facility, Dorvex watched from behind a cracked viewport, his fingers laced together, unmoving. He had stopped yelling 2 days ago. Now, he simply watched. He understood the rules now. This was not war. This was punishment. Maya made her camp in the hollow of a fallen tree that night, 30 meters off the ridge and shielded from drone scans. She cleaned her rifle by moonlight, careful with each motion, precise with every bolt. She drank warm broth in silence. The third shot would come tomorrow. But not at dawn. At dusk. Dusk was when shadows lengthened. When soldiers relaxed their grip. When paranoia blurred into exhaustion. She waited until the day dragged past its midpoint. Then she returned to the ridge. Through her scope, she saw Dorvex himself outside, inspecting damage, barking orders at a pair of subordinates. Their tempers were unraveling. They had made no patrols that morning, no repairs. They had simply watched the trees, hoping the forest would explain itself. Maya found her spot beneath the outcropping, belly down, snow crusted on her hood. Her heartbeat slowed. The third shot wasn't for chaos. It was for memory. She found Dorvex in the center of her reticle. Not because he was the commander, but because he knew now. She wanted him to feel the exact moment he was seen. She didn't fire immediately. She watched. He tilted his head, paused mid-sentence, turned toward the woods. He felt it. She decided. The round struck his right shoulder, just beneath the armored plate, tearing through fabric and flesh. He dropped like a tree, gasping, clutching the wound, his face twisted in disbelief more than pain. The others screamed. Alarms blared. Searchlights ignited. Too late. Maya was gone, already buried under snow and stillness. That night, there were no patrols. Just noise. Shouting. Desperation. And silence between the cracks. She returned to her cabin only briefly, to gather. Not to rest. Her eyes were sharper now. Her limbs moved with intent. Every trap she'd set had served its purpose. Now, it was time to dismantle them. Not because she was done. Because she wanted them to think she was. The traps near the southern gully were disarmed. The tree snare removed. Even the decoy dummy was gone, its fabric burned and scattered. Like the forest had reclaimed it all. Like it had never existed. She wanted the soldiers to think the hunter had vanished. She gave them silence for 2 full days. No shots. No traps. No footprints. They began to leave the facility again. Carefully. Nervously. That was what she needed. The illusion of safety. One soldier, one of the younger ones, the one with the limp, stepped beyond the perimeter line late in the afternoon. He was alone, retrieving something from a broken skiff embedded in the snow. Maya watched him. She did not raise her rifle. She wanted him to make it back. When he did, the others gathered around him, eager for supplies, their backs exposed. She was already flanking them. In the trees. Silent. She didn't fire. She let them hear the click. Just once. Metal against ice. Purposeful. Not a shot. Not a trap. Just enough to twist every neck in her direction. Then she was gone again. And now, they knew she was watching. Everywhere. Always. By nightfall, Dorvex sat alone in the tower again, his arm bound tight, expression hollow. He hadn't spoken since the shot. He had seen his death through a scope he could not trace. And Maya knew. The war was already won. But not finished. Not until the last mistake was made. And she had 1 bullet left to make sure it happened. The wind howled low across the ridge as dusk swallowed the treetops. Pale violet clouds bled into the horizon, smearing the sky like bruises left by the war. Snow fell again, soft and constant, muffling everything except the heavy steps echoing through the trees. Maya Renault crouched behind the base of a twisted pine, watching the last squad fall apart. Only 3 of them remained. She hadn't fired her rifle in days. She didn't need to. The traps had been reset, not to kill, but to guide. Every misstep, every failed maneuver, every echo of movement in the forest had pulled them deeper into her domain. They no longer searched for her. They fled from her. And with every turn, she was still ahead of them. One soldier dropped his helmet today. Didn't bother picking it up. Maya had noted the moment, marked the path. They were unraveling. The second-to-last unit, a scarred brute with a plasma axe, had died to a fall trap 2 nights ago. His scream had lasted 3 seconds. Dorvex hadn't ordered a retrieval. The snow swallowed the body. Now it was Dorvex and 2 others. He no longer wore his commander's insignia. The pauldron had been torn off. His coat was blood-stained, the right sleeve stiff with dried wound dressing. His steps were slower now. Not from injury. From doubt. Every breath he took seemed heavier, as if the air itself mocked him. They didn't speak anymore. Not to each other. Not into comms. They were listening. They believed she was everywhere. Maya didn't dissuade them. She followed silently, never letting her silhouette fully emerge from the snow-draped world. Just a shadow. Just breath. Just the whisper of her boots as she moved in ghost lines between branches. She didn't hate them. Not anymore. Pity had taken root. But pity did not stay her hand. By morning, one of the two lieutenants broke formation. He bolted toward the tree line, gasping something unintelligible. Panic stretched across his face like a mask melting from heat. Maya didn't shoot. She let him run. The scream came 5 minutes later, a short, wet sound swallowed by the ground. A snare or maybe the pitfall trap by the frozen creek. She didn't check. Now there were two. Dorvex and the final soldier, smaller, younger. Someone who'd survived only by staying close to the commander's shadow. They hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Maya had destroyed their remaining supply crate, rigging the rations to a proximity mine. It hadn't killed anyone, but the lesson had landed. Desperation made people louder. And loud things didn't last here. By midday, Maya saw them stop. They sat beneath a hollowed-out stump, their backs to the rising ridge. No shelter. No heat. Just exhaustion and whatever courage they still clung to. Dorvex rubbed his temples with gloved fingers. The younger soldier stared at nothing, lips chapped and trembling. Maya watched from the tree line, 20 meters up, eyes steady behind the scope. She didn't pull the trigger. She studied them. Dorvex had changed. There was no arrogance left, no cruelty, not even rage. Just the weight of realization. That everything he believed, the superiority, the strategy, the systems, meant nothing when the land hated you and one woman refused to be broken. The younger soldier stood first, wobbling on half-frozen legs. He raised his weapon, not in defense, but in surrender. Arms stretched. Gun pointed toward the sky. He took 2 steps forward into the open. Maya's finger twitched near the trigger. Then she saw it. The soldier dropped the rifle into the snow and took another step forward, unarmed. Maya blinked. He turned toward Dorvex, voice carrying just enough to hear. "We lost." Dorvex didn't move. The young man stepped back toward the stump, knelt down, and removed his helmet. The frost had blistered his cheeks, but his eyes were clear now. "You can stay," he said quietly. "But I'm done." He didn't speak again. He sat down, cross-legged, hands empty. Waiting. Maya stayed in her position for 15 more minutes. Then she vanished into the forest. She didn't fire. Not that day. Not yet. Dorvex didn't leave the stump for the rest of the afternoon. He sat beside his last soldier, staring out into the woods, watching phantoms only he could see. His body slouched forward, as though the trees had stolen his spine. Nightfall came. The younger soldier fell asleep first, head tilted sideways, breath shallow but steady. Maya circled them for 2 hours, checking for changes, reading the rhythm of their camp. There were no traps. No tech. Just cold bones and regrets. She waited until the second moon was overhead before approaching. Her boots left no sound. Dorvex stirred as she stepped within 10 paces, eyes opening not in surprise, but in confirmation. He already knew she would come. He didn't move. His weapon rested beside him, untouched. His hand remained limp. Maya stopped 5 paces away, rifle aimed at his chest. The younger soldier didn't wake. For a moment, they stared at one another. Dorvex's face was pale beneath the bruising. He looked old now. Not from age, but from erosion. "Do it," he whispered. Maya said nothing. He tilted his head, neck stiff. "You think you've won. That this," he gestured vaguely at the forest, "makes you better." Still, she didn't answer. He laughed softly, a rasp more than a sound. "We came here thinking we'd make an example of your people. A warning. But you—" He met her eyes again. "You made an example of us." The silence stretched. He didn't flinch. Maya slowly lowered her rifle. Dorvex blinked, confusion cutting through fatigue. "You won't?" he asked, almost bitter. She stepped closer, pulled a small object from her belt, and tossed it toward him. It landed in the snow with a soft clink. A transmitter beacon. Terran-coded. A way home. Dorvex stared at it. "You're letting me live?" Maya spoke, finally, her voice low, cold, and unshaken. "I'm letting him live." She nodded toward the young soldier, still asleep in the snow. Dorvex stared at her, breath catching for a moment. Then he nodded once. Slow. Waited. Maya turned away. She didn't look back as she vanished into the trees. The next morning, a rescue shuttle descended through the cloud cover, summoned by the signal she had left behind. It hovered briefly, engines whining against the wind. Dorvex limped aboard with the sleeping soldier slung over his shoulder. They never returned. Maya watched from the edge of a rocky crag, hidden beneath pine and frost. Her rifle was slung across her back, unused now. The fight was over. The invaders were gone. The trees whispered their approval. She returned to her cabin that evening, firewood stacked neatly beside the door. The maps she'd drawn were rolled and stored, and her traps dismantled for the final time. There was peace again. But Maya knew what peace really was now. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of readiness. She cleaned her rifle with care, movements practiced, precise. The metal gleamed in the firelight. She didn't store it away. She kept it nearby. Outside, the storm clouds gathered again. But they no longer frightened her. Let them come. She would still be standing.